The Velkari had traveled across the stars for 3,000 years, and in all that time, they had never found a species they could not understand, predict, or control. They were collectors of knowledge, traders of rare goods, and when it suited their purposes, they were hunters of specimens from primitive worlds. Their great research stations held creatures from 100 different planets, each one studied and catalogued and filed away in the vast archives of the collective. To the Velkari, the galaxy was simply a library waiting to be read, and every species was just another book on the shelf. Commander Zethral stood on the bridge of his research vessel, the quiet shadow, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on the viewscreen. Earth, the natives called it, such a simple name for such an unremarkable world. "What do we know about the dominant species?" he asked his science officer, a young Velkari named Threshna who was eager to prove herself. "They call themselves humans, Commander," Threshna replied, her long fingers dancing across the data console. "Bipedal, carbon-based, average lifespan of approximately 80 cycles. They have no natural weapons to speak of, no claws, no venom, no armored hide. Their physical strength is mediocre at best, and their senses are quite limited compared to most species we have catalogued." Zethral made a sound of mild interest. "And their technology?" "Primitive but developing rapidly. They have achieved basic space travel within their own system, but they have not yet discovered faster-than-light methods. They are decades away from becoming a true spacefaring civilization, perhaps longer." "So they pose no threat to the collection mission?" "None whatsoever, Commander. Our scans show they have detected our vessel, but their communication signals suggest confusion rather than alarm. They do not even agree among themselves about what we are. Some believe we are a natural phenomenon, others think we are a secret project from a rival nation." "They are," Threshna paused, searching for the right word. "They are fractured, Commander, divided into hundreds of competing groups that seem to spend most of their energy fighting each other." Zethral's thin lips curved into what passed for a smile among his kind. A divided species was always easier to collect from. No unified response, no coordinated defense. Just scattered primitives running in fear while the Velkari took what they wanted. "Select a target," he ordered. "Young specimen preferred, healthy and undamaged. We will collect, study, and be gone before these humans even understand what has happened." The quiet shadow descended through Earth's atmosphere 3 hours later, cloaking technology hiding it from the primitive detection systems below. Threshna had selected a rural area in a region the humans called Montana, isolated, sparsely populated, minimal risk of witnesses. The farmstead below was modest by any standard. A wooden house, a red barn, fields of some grain crop stretching toward distant mountains. 2 adult humans worked near the barn while a smaller figure played in the yard, a juvenile female according to the scans, approximately 7 cycles old. "Perfect." Zethral gave the order, and the collection team deployed with practiced efficiency. 6 Velkari soldiers in light combat armor, armed with stun weapons and capture nets. They had done this hundreds of times on dozens of worlds. It was routine. The adult humans saw them first. A male and female, presumably the juvenile's parents. They made sounds of alarm, screaming, the translation software called it, and the male grabbed a primitive projectile weapon from inside the barn. He fired twice before a stun blast dropped him to the ground. The female ran toward the juvenile, arms outstretched, still making those terrible screaming sounds. Another stun blast and she fell beside her mate. The juvenile, Lily she was called, the software had picked up the name from the adult's screams, stood frozen in the yard. Her small face showed an expression the Velkari recognized from 1,000 other collections. Pure, helpless terror. One of the soldiers approached her slowly, speaking in soft tones that the translation software converted to her language. "Do not be afraid, small one. You will not be harmed. You are simply coming with us for a while." The child's response was to turn and run. She was fast for her size, the soldiers noted with clinical interest. Her small legs pumped furiously as she sprinted toward the fields, toward the tall grain that might hide her. But she was a child, and the Velkhari were experienced hunters. They caught her in seconds. The sedation was administered quickly and humanely. The Velkhari prided themselves on treating their specimens well. A healthy specimen provided better data after all. Within moments, young Lily Chen was unconscious, cradled in a soldier's arms as the team returned to the ship. Zethral watched the collection on his view screen and felt satisfaction. Clean, professional, efficient. Another successful acquisition for the collective's archives. "Set course for Research Station 12, he commanded. "Standard cruise speed. We should arrive in approximately 18 planetary rotations." As the quiet shadow rose back through the atmosphere, cloaked and silent, Zethral spared one last glance at the viewscreen showing the farmstead below. The two adult humans were beginning to stir, the stun effects wearing off. Soon they would wake to find their offspring gone, taken by beings they could not understand or fight. He felt a small twinge of something, not quite guilt, for the Velkhari did not experience guilt as other species did, but perhaps a distant cousin of it. The adults would suffer, he knew. They would grieve and rage and eventually accept their loss, as all primitives did. In a generation or two, the incident would become a legend, a story told around fires, dismissed by most as fantasy. That was how it always went. Zethral did not notice the human military aircraft scrambling from bases across the continent below. He did not pay attention to the frantic communications bouncing between human governments. He did not see the emergency meetings being called in capital cities around the globe. Why would he? The humans were primitives, divided, weak, and utterly incapable of posing any threat to the Velkhari collective. They would mourn their lost child and then they would move on, as all species did. The commander retired to his quarters to rest, confident that the mission was complete and the journey home would be uneventful. He had made a terrible mistake. He had studied human biology and found it unremarkable. He had analyzed human technology and found it primitive. He had observed human society and found it fractured and weak. But there was one thing Zethral had not studied, one thing his scientists had not measured, one thing that did not show up on any scan or analysis. He had not studied what humans become when you take their children. He had not measured the depth of human love, or the fury it could transform into. He had not observed what a divided species could become when united by rage. And because of this failure, because of this single blind spot in 3,000 years of studying alien life, Commander Zethral had just made his species the enemy of the most dangerous creatures the galaxy had ever produced. He slept peacefully that night, dreaming of commendations and promotions. Far below, on the planet he had dismissed as irrelevant, something was awakening, something ancient and primal and absolutely unstoppable. Humanity was getting angry, and the galaxy would never be the same. The news spread across Earth like wildfire, jumping from screen to screen, phone to phone, mind to mind. Within 1 hour of the abduction, every major government on the planet knew what had happened. Within 2 hours, every news network was broadcasting the footage, shaky cell phone video from a neighbor who had seen strange lights, satellite imagery showing an unidentified craft descending through the clouds, the testimony of David and Maria Chen, who had woken on the ground of their farm to find their daughter gone. Within 3 hours, the world was watching. And within 6 hours, something happened that the Velkhari had never seen in 3,000 years of studying alien civilizations. Humanity unified. The President of the United States was on the phone with the leaders of Russia and China before the sun set on that terrible day. Old enemies who had spent decades building weapons to destroy each other now spoke as allies. The petty disputes of politics and territory and ideology seemed suddenly small, suddenly meaningless, in the face of what had happened. Something had come from the stars and taken a human child. It did not matter that Lily Chen was American. It did not matter that her family was of Chinese descent. It did not matter what religion they practiced or what political party they supported. None of the things that humans normally used to divide themselves mattered anymore. She was human, she was a child, she was one of them. And they were going to get her back. The United Nations Security Council held an emergency session that lasted only 11 minutes. There was no debate, no arguments, no vetoes. For the first time in the organization's history, the vote was completely unanimous. Every nation agreed. Every leader signed. Earth was going to war. But how do you fight an enemy that can cross the stars when your own ships can barely reach the moon? How do you rescue a child from beings whose technology is centuries beyond your own? The answer came from a secret that had been kept hidden for nearly a decade. Deep beneath a mountain in Nevada, in a facility that officially did not exist, humanity had been building something extraordinary. The Defiance, they called it, Earth's first true starship, equipped with an experimental faster-than-light drive, reverse-engineered from a crashed alien probe found in the Pacific Ocean 15 years earlier. The project had been classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of people in each major government even knew it existed. The ship was years from completion, its systems untested, its crew untrained. None of that mattered now. General Sarah Mitchell, the officer in charge of the Defiance project, received her orders directly from a conference call that included the leaders of 12 nations. Her response was simple: "We will be ready in 72 hours." Her staff told her it was impossible. The ship needed months more work. The drive had never been tested at full power. A dozen critical systems were incomplete. Mitchell looked at them with eyes that burned with cold fire. "A little girl is out there, taken by aliens, scared and alone. Tell me again what is impossible." They did not argue after that. Word went out through secret channels, and engineers began arriving from around the world. American scientists worked beside Russian technicians. Chinese experts collaborated with European specialists. Old rivals shared classified research without hesitation. The barriers of nation and language and history fell away like dust in a hurricane. They worked in shifts that ran around the clock. When one team collapsed from exhaustion, another took their place. Coffee and energy drinks flowed like water. Several workers suffered heart attacks from the stress and pace. 2 of them died, but still the work continued. No one complained. No one quit. They all understood what was at stake. In 68 hours, 4 hours ahead of schedule, the Defiance was declared operational. Now they needed a crew. Colonel Marcus Webb was selected to lead the mission within hours of the announcement. He was a decorated combat pilot, a veteran of 3 wars, a man known for his iron will and tactical brilliance. But more than that, he was a father. His own daughter was the same age as Lily Chen. When they asked him to command the rescue mission, knowing the ship was untested, knowing the odds were terrible, knowing he might never return, his answer was immediate. "When do we leave?" Volunteers for the mission numbered in the millions. Soldiers, scientists, doctors, engineers, people from every nation and every background stepped forward, willing to risk their lives for a child they had never met. The selection process was brutal and fast, narrowing the candidates down to 300 of the best humanity had to offer. They came from 47 different countries. They spoke dozens of languages. They had different skin colors and different beliefs and different histories. But in the crew quarters of the Defiance, none of that mattered. They were all human. They were all angry. They were all determined. The night before launch, Colonel Webb gathered his crew in the main hangar. The Defiance loomed behind him, a massive vessel of steel and hope and fury. The 300 men and women who would crew her stood at attention, their faces hard with purpose. Webb was not a man given to long speeches, but he understood that this moment mattered. This was not just a military mission. This was humanity's answer to the stars. 2 days ago, he began, his voice steady and strong, beings from another world came to our planet. They came in secret like thieves in the night. They took one of our children, a 7-year-old girl named Lily Chen, and they fled back into the darkness between the stars. He paused, letting his words sink in. They thought we would do nothing. They thought we were too weak, too divided, too primitive to respond. They thought they could take what they wanted and face no consequences. His voice grew harder. They were wrong. A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembled crew. We are not coming to negotiate, Webb continued. We are not coming to learn. We are not coming to make friends or establish diplomatic relations. We are coming for one reason and one reason only, to bring our daughter home. He used that word deliberately, our daughter. Not their daughter, not the Chen family's daughter, our daughter, because that was what she was now. She belonged to all of humanity, and all of humanity was coming for her. I will not lie to you, Webb said. This mission is dangerous. Our ship is untested. We are heading into unknown space to face an enemy we do not understand. Some of us may not come back. Maybe none of us will come back. He looked across the faces of his crew, young and old, men and women, every race and nationality united in common purpose. But I know this. I know that somewhere out there, a little girl is scared and alone. She is waiting for someone to come for her. She is waiting for us. And I would rather die trying to save her than live knowing I did nothing. The crew erupted in cheers that shook the hangar walls. Webb raised his hand for silence. We launch at dawn. God help anyone who gets in our way. The words would later be inscribed on monuments across a dozen worlds. They would be taught in schools and remembered in songs. They would become the battle cry of humanity's expansion into the stars. But for now, they were simply the promise of a father to a frightened child. We are coming for you. Hold on. We are coming. The Valkyrie research station orbited a dead moon in an empty system, far from any trade routes or territorial claims. For 800 years it had operated in perfect secrecy, a place where the collective conducted studies that required privacy and isolation. Its defenses were modest, designed to discourage pirates and deter curious explorers, not to withstand a military assault. Commander Zethral had transmitted his mission report 3 days earlier, and now he relaxed in his quarters aboard the Quiet Shadow, which was docked at the station's main port. The human child had been transferred to the medical bay for initial examination. Everything was proceeding according to standard protocol. He was reviewing data files when the alarm began to scream. What is happening? He demanded, rushing to the bridge. His sensor officer was staring at her console with an expression Zethral had never seen before, pure, naked terror. Commander, a vessel has just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. It is almost on top of us. Impossible. We would have detected its approach. Nothing can exit FTL that close to a gravity well. It just did, Commander, and the configuration, the energy signatures. The officer turned to face him. It matches the primitive technology of the humans. Zethral felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans, here, that was impossible. They did not have faster-than-light capability. They were decades away from such technology. Show me. The view screen flickered to life, and Zethral saw the vessel that would haunt his nightmares for the rest of his days. The Defiance was not beautiful by Valkyrie standards. It was angular and aggressive, all harsh lines and brutal functionality. No elegant curves, no aesthetic considerations, just raw, purposeful power. It looked exactly like what it was, a weapon. And it was launching smaller craft, dozens of them, streaking toward the station like angry insects. Raise shields, activate defense systems, Zethral commanded, and open a communication channel. The defense grid came online, ancient weapons that had not been fired in centuries. Plasma turrets tracked the incoming craft and began to fire. 2 of the human shuttles exploded, then a third. 23 humans died in those first seconds of combat. Zethral did not know it then, but killing those humans was the worst tactical decision he could have made. He had hoped to discourage the attack, to show the primitives that resistance was futile. Instead, he had simply made the survivors angrier. Communication channel open, Commander. Zethral straightened his uniform and put on his most diplomatic expression. Human vessel, this is Commander Zethral of the Velkari Collective. There has been a misunderstanding. We are prepared to return your juvenile and discuss appropriate compensation. There is no need for. The response was a single word, no. Then the channel went dead. The human shuttles did not slow down. They did not retreat. They did not even attempt to evade the station's fire. They flew straight at the hull, absorbing losses, and then they were too close for the turrets to track. Zethral felt the station shudder as the first breach charges detonated. "Security teams to all entry points," he shouted. "They are boarding." But even as he gave the order, he knew something was wrong. The Velkari had faced boarders before, pirates, rival traders, even the occasional desperate species trying to free captured specimens. They had protocols for this. They had training. What they did not have was any preparation for what came through those breached airlocks. The humans moved like nothing Zethral had ever seen. They did not fight with the careful calculation of trained soldiers. They did not advance with the measured caution of beings who valued their own lives. They attacked with a ferocity that seemed almost insane. A security team of 6 Velkari took position in Corridor 7, weapons ready. The humans came around the corner and the Velkari opened fire. 3 humans fell and the rest kept coming. They did not stop to check their wounded. They did not pause to take cover. They screamed, actually screamed, and charged directly into the gunfire. The Velkari broke and ran. They could not help it. Their every instinct told them to flee from these howling monsters who seemed to feel no fear and accept no defeat. Zethral watched the security feeds from the bridge and felt his understanding of the universe crumbling. This was not supposed to happen. The humans were primitive. They were weak. They were at the bridge door. The explosion threw Zethral across the room. When he looked up, there were humans pouring through the smoking gap where the door had been. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons that crackled with energy. Their faces were hidden behind dark visors, but their body language spoke clearly. They were not here to negotiate. One of them grabbed Zethral by the throat and lifted him off the ground with one hand. The human's visor retracted, revealing a face twisted with fury. It was their leader, Zethral realized, the one called Webb. "Where is she?" The words were quiet, almost soft, but they carried more menace than any shout. Zethral tried to speak, but the hand around his throat was too tight. "Where is she?" This time the question was a roar. "In Medical Bay," Zethral gasped. "Deck 4, she is unharmed. I swear she is unharmed." Webb dropped him and turned to his soldiers. "Kowalski, take your team. Deck 4, Medical Bay, move." A female human, Sergeant Kowalski, Zethral would learn later, nodded once and sprinted from the bridge, a dozen soldiers following. Webb looked down at Zethral, and the commander saw something in those alien eyes that chilled him to his core. He had studied 1,000 species. He had cataloged emotions across the galaxy. He knew anger, he knew hatred, he knew the cold desire for revenge. But what he saw in Webb's eyes was something different, something more primal, more absolute. It was the look of a predator that had found the creature threatening its young. "You took a human child," Webb said. "You came to our world and you took one of our children." I did not know." "You did not know what?" Zethral struggled to find words. "We did not know you would come. We did not know you could come. your species, you were supposed to be. Primitive, Webb leaned close. Weak, divided. Is that what your reports said? Yes. Your reports were wrong. An explosion echoed from somewhere deep in the station. We studied you, Zethral said desperately. We analyzed your biology, your technology, your society. You should not have been able to do this. You should not have been able to unify so quickly, build a ship so fast, track us across the stars. It defies all our models. Webb smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Zethral had ever seen. You studied the wrong things. You measured our strength and found it average. You tested our technology and found it primitive. But you never thought to study what we become when someone threatens our children. What do you become? Webb leaned even closer, until his face was inches from Zethral's. Everything that nightmares are made of. At that moment, Sergeant Kowalski's voice crackled over the communication system. Colonel Webb, we have her. Repeat, we have the package. She is alive and unharmed. Something changed in Webb's face. The fury did not disappear, but something else joined it. Relief, love, joy. Zethral could not be certain. Excellent work, Sergeant. Get her to the shuttle. We are leaving. Webb stood and addressed his soldiers. Mission accomplished. We have what we came for. Fall back to the Defiance. As he walked away, Zethral called out one final question. What happens now? Will there be war between our species? Webb paused at the ruined doorway. He did not turn around. That depends entirely on whether you ever make this mistake again. Then he was gone. Sergeant Anna Kowalski cradled the child in her arms as she ran through the smoking corridors of the station. The girl was small, so small, wrapped in a thin medical gown that the aliens had dressed her in. She was still groggy from whatever sedatives they had used, her eyes fluttering open and closed, confused and frightened. It is okay, sweetheart, Kowalski murmured as she ran. You are safe now. We are taking you home. The words felt strange in her mouth. Just hours ago, she had watched two of her brothers-in-arms die when their shuttle was destroyed during the approach. Good men, brave men, who would never see Earth again. The grief was still fresh, still raw, like a wound that had not yet begun to heal. But when she looked at the child in her arms, she knew their sacrifice had been worth it. This is why they had come. This is why they had crossed the stars. This is why 23 of them had given their lives. For her. For this one small girl who represented something larger than herself. She was proof that humanity would never abandon its own. She was the reason 300 soldiers had volunteered for what might have been a suicide mission. She was the answer to every alien species that thought humans could be victimized without consequence. Kowalski reached the shuttle bay and found the rest of her team waiting. They formed a protective circle around her as she carried Lily aboard the shuttle, their weapons trained on every shadow, every doorway. Not a single Velkari was foolish enough to challenge them. Package is secure, Kowalski reported over the comm, returning to Defiance. The shuttle lifted off and streaked across the gap between the station and the human vessel. Through the viewport, Kowalski could see the damage they had done. Hull breaches venting atmosphere, defense turrets twisted and broken, entire sections dark and lifeless. The Velkari had built this station over 800 years. The humans had crippled it in less than 2 hours. Aboard the Defiance, the mood was electric. Word had spread that the child was recovered, that the mission was successful. Soldiers who had been grim and focused during the assault now allowed themselves to feel something like joy. They had done it. Against all odds, against an enemy with superior technology and centuries more experience, they had done it. Lily was taken to the medical bay, where human doctors checked her vitals and ran tests to ensure she had not been harmed. She was confused and scared, crying for her parents, but physically she was uninjured. The Velkari, for all their crimes, had at least kept their promise to treat her well. Colonel Webb visited her as soon as the doctors gave clearance. He knelt beside her bed, and spoke to her in a gentle voice that none of his soldiers had ever heard him use. "Hello, Lily, my name is Marcus. Do you know where you are?" The girl shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You are on a spaceship. We came a very long way to find you." "Where is my mommy? Where is my daddy?" "They are waiting for you back home. We are going to take you to them, okay? Everything is going to be okay now." Lily looked at him with eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. "The tall gray people took me. They said I had to stay with them." "They were wrong," Webb said firmly. "You do not have to stay with anyone you do not want to, and those tall gray people, they are never going to bother you or anyone else ever again. I promise." He stayed with her until she fell asleep, her small hand clutching his finger. When he finally stood to leave, his face was wet with tears he had not realized he was shedding. One of his officers was waiting outside. "Colonel, what are your orders? Do we withdraw?" Webb wiped his face and took a deep breath. When he spoke again, his voice was steady. "Not yet. There is something I need to do first, something the galaxy needs to hear." He walked to the bridge with purpose in every step. His crew watched him pass, saw the determination in his eyes, and knew that something important was about to happen. "Communications officer, I want you to broadcast on every frequency you can reach. Velkari channels, commercial bands, emergency frequencies, everything. I want every species within range to hear what I am about to say." "Yes, sir, broadcasting in 5 seconds." Webb stood before the main view screen which showed the crippled station hanging in space. Behind him, his crew assembled, bloodied but unbowed, victorious but not yet finished. He waited for the signal that the broadcast was live, then began to speak. "This is Colonel Marcus Webb of the human vessel Defiance, speaking on behalf of the planet Earth. I am addressing this message to the Velkari Collective, and to every other species, empire, and civilization that may be listening." He paused to let the words sink in across the light years. "Several days ago, a Velkari ship entered our solar system without permission. It landed on our planet without invitation, and it took one of our children, a 7-year-old girl named Lily Chen, believing that we were too primitive, too divided, too weak to respond." His voice grew harder. "They were wrong. You have now seen what humans are capable of when one of our own is threatened. You have seen how quickly we can unify, how far we can reach, and how fiercely we can fight. The Velkari thought they understood us. They studied our biology and our technology and our society, and they concluded that we posed no threat. They made a critical error. They failed to study the one thing that matters most about our species." He leaned forward, his eyes blazing into the camera. "Humans love. We love our families, our children, our friends, our nations, our species. We love with a depth and ferocity that your scientists cannot measure and your analysts cannot predict. And when something threatens what we love, we transform. We become something more than we were, stronger, faster, more determined, more dangerous." The Velkari took a human child. In response, species that have been enemies for generations united overnight. A ship that was years from completion was made operational in 3 days. 300 soldiers volunteered for a mission they expected not to survive. And now your station burns while our people celebrate. Let this serve as notice to the galaxy. Humanity is no longer isolated. Humanity is no longer silent. Humanity is watching, and humanity remembers. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, but somehow it carried even more weight. "If you come to us in peace, you will find friends. We will trade with you, learn from you, share with you. We will welcome you as brothers and sisters among the stars. But if you come to us with hostile intent, if you threaten our world, harm our people, or take our children, then you will face the full fury of a species forged in the fires of 10,000 wars. We have spent our entire history fighting each other. We have developed weapons and tactics and strategies that your civilizations cannot imagine. And we have done this while divided. Imagine what we can do now that we are united." He straightened to his full height. "To the Velkari Collective specifically, you have one chance. Apologize, pay reparations to the Chen family, disband your collection program permanently, and pray that we never have reason to return. To everyone else, remember this day. Remember what happened when a species thought they could take from humanity without consequence. Remember the name of this ship, Defiance, and what it represents. We will not be conquered. We will not be enslaved. We will not be victims. We are human, and we are just getting started." He made a cutting gesture, and the transmission ended. For a long moment, silence filled the bridge. Then, slowly, one of the officers began to clap. Another joined, then another, until the entire crew was applauding and cheering. Colonel Webb did not smile. He simply turned to his navigation officer and gave the order he had been waiting to give since they left Earth. "Set course for home. We have a little girl who wants to see her parents." The Defiance turned away from the crippled station and vanished into the stars. Humanity had made its entrance onto the galactic stage. And nothing would ever be the same. The transmission was heard on 10,000 worlds. In council chambers and trading posts, on military vessels and civilian stations, across empires that had stood for millennia and civilizations that were older than Earth's first cities, beings of every shape and size watched a human male speak words that would change the course of galactic history. The reactions were as varied as the species themselves. The Thorian hegemony, a warrior culture that valued strength above all else, watched with something approaching respect. They had dismissed humans as irrelevant, too small, too short-lived, too isolated to matter. But warriors recognize warriors, and what they saw in Colonel Webb's eyes was unmistakable. Here was a species that understood battle, that embraced it, that drew strength from it. The collective intelligence of Nexus Prime, a vast network of linked minds that prided itself on logical analysis, found itself confused for the first time in centuries. The humans had acted irrationally, risking hundreds of lives, spending enormous resources, crossing interstellar distances for a single juvenile. The mathematics made no sense, and yet somehow it had worked. Perhaps there was something to this love that the humans spoke of, something that their equations had failed to account for. The merchant guilds of a dozen systems immediately began revising their trading protocols. Earth had resources that the galaxy wanted, and now it was clear that the humans could be neither ignored nor exploited. New trade agreements would need to be drafted, new relationships cultivated. The humans were going to be important, and the guilds intended to profit from that importance. But it was the Velkari Collective that felt the impact most deeply. Commander Zethral stood before the High Council in chains, a disgraced officer who had brought catastrophe upon his people. The councilors watched recordings of the assault, saw their station torn apart by howling humans, heard Webb's message echoing across the stars. "This is unprecedented," the chief counselor declared. "In 3,000 years, no species has ever responded to collection in this manner. No species has ever tracked us, attacked us, defeated us so thoroughly." "We must retaliate," another counselor demanded. "We cannot allow such an insult to go unanswered." But the military advisor shook his head grimly. "You saw the recordings. You heard their message. They crossed the stars in a ship that should have taken years to complete. They unified a fractured species overnight. They fought with a ferocity that our soldiers could not match. And this was their response to one child. What do you imagine they would do if we actually went to war with them?" The council fell silent. "We have studied their history," the advisor continued. "They have been fighting each other since before they developed written language. They have weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They have used those weapons on themselves. They are, without question, the most violent species we have ever encountered, and now they are united against us." The The chief counselor's face had gone pale. "What do you recommend?" "Exactly what the human commander demanded. We apologize, we pay reparations, we disband the collection program, and we pray to whatever gods still listen that they accept our surrender." The vote was unanimous. 3 days later, a Velkari diplomatic vessel arrived in Earth's solar system, broadcasting messages of peace and apology. The reparations they offered were staggering: technology, resources, star charts, and trade agreements that would have taken humanity centuries to acquire on their own. David and Maria Chen, Lily's parents, received a personal apology from the chief counselor himself, along with enough compensation to ensure they would never want for anything again. They accepted the apology gracefully, though David made it clear that he would never forgive what had been done to his daughter. The humans, to the surprise of many galactic observers, accepted the surrender. They did not demand conquest or vassalage. They did not seek revenge beyond what had already been taken. They simply wanted assurance that it would never happen again. "Remarkable," a Thorian diplomat commented to his colleagues. "They had the Velkari at their mercy. They could have demanded anything, yet they chose peace." "Do not mistake mercy for weakness," his colleague replied. "They showed us what they become when provoked. Now they are showing us what they can be when treated with respect. The message is clear: befriend us and prosper, threaten us and burn. It is actually quite sophisticated diplomacy." The years that followed saw humanity's rapid rise among the galactic community. The technology gained from the Velkari settlement accelerated human development by generations. Earth established its first off-world colonies within a decade. Human traders and explorers spread across the stars, curious and adventurous and always protective of their own. Other species approached them carefully at first, uncertain how to interact with these strange, emotional creatures. But they soon learned that humans could be wonderful friends, generous, loyal, creative, and endlessly entertaining. Human art and music spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Human foods became delicacies on 100 worlds. Human stories and films and games found audiences among species that had never experienced imagination quite like this. But everyone remembered the lesson of the Velkari. Never threaten what a human loves. Lily Chen grew up in a changed world. She was famous, of course, the girl who had been taken, the girl who had sparked humanity's awakening. But she did not let fame define her. She studied, she learned, and when she came of age, she dedicated herself to building bridges between species. At 32, she became humanity's first official ambassador to the galactic community. It was a role she had been born for. Who better to represent human compassion than the child who had inspired it? Who better to speak of human fury than the girl who had witnessed its results? She kept a photograph on her desk throughout her career. It showed the crew of the Defiance, all 300 of them, gathered in the hangar bay before their historic launch. 23 of those faces belonged to people who had never returned, heroes who had given their lives so that she could live hers. She looked at that photograph every day. It reminded her of what humans were capable of, both the fury that had rescued her and the love that had motivated it. Colonel Marcus Webb, now retired, came to visit her office one day. He was older, gray-haired, walking with a slight limp from an injury he had taken during the boarding action. But his eyes were still sharp, still fierce. "Ambassador Chen," he said with a slight smile, "I remember when you were small enough to carry in one arm. And I remember waking up on a strange ship with a man I had never met telling me everything would be okay," Lily replied. "You kept your promise, Colonel." It was never in question, not for any of us. They talked for hours, about the mission, about the years since, about humanity's future among the stars. When Webb finally rose to leave, Lily asked him one final question. "Do you think we did the right thing, showing the galaxy what we are capable of?" Webb considered the question carefully. "I think," he said slowly, that every species has to decide what it stands for. The Velkari stood for knowledge without ethics. They took what they wanted because they could. We showed them and everyone else that we stand for something different. We stand for each other. We protect our own, no matter the cost. He smiled. And now the whole galaxy knows it. They know that humans are not to be trifled with. They know that we will cross any distance, fight any battle, pay any price for the people we love. And because they know this, because they respect this, we live in peace. Peace through strength, Lily murmured. Peace through love, Webb corrected her. The strength is just how we express it. He walked to the door, then paused. There is a saying now, did you know, among the other species. They tell their children, never take what a human loves, they will find you and they will never stop. He chuckled softly. I think that might be the greatest legacy of all. Lily watched him go, then turned to look out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there on countless worlds, beings of every kind were going about their lives, trading, exploring, dreaming, loving. And somewhere in the back of their minds, they all remembered the same lesson. Never take what a human loves. Because humans will come for what is theirs. They will cross the stars. They will defy the odds. They will never, ever, ever stop. That was humanity's message to the universe. And the universe had received it loud and clear.